we'll talk about 2.1 and work session, and then it's the final item on our regular agenda tonight. It's posted to a resolution adopting it is posted on that agenda. So I'll go to Ms. Garza. Becky, do we have anyone signed up for citizen comment?
No, sir, we don't. Okay,
that's thank you, Ms. Garza. That's in case you couldn't hear that. That was no. There are no one has signed up for citizen comments. That being the case, we'll move on to item 2. The first item there is 2.1. It's that legislative agenda that I mentioned earlier. You'll recall that council, that on November 12th, I believe, at our planning meeting, we first looked at this. We provided some feedback to Mr. Atkinson. We had Ms. Joy spent a bit of time not only catching us up to date on work from the Texas Municipal League, which she serves on their legislative committee as well as on the represents us on the board. We did. I guess that's the only time we've talked about it. We originally were going to have it on our agenda. I can't recall. Anyway, is that right?
We were on the 16th. Yes.
Yeah, we chose to push it to this meeting. So you've had a chance to review it. You've had a chance to offer comments to staff. I will turn the floor over to Mr. Atkinson. Jarrett.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Give me just a moment. I'm going to flip the screen real quick.
While he's doing that, Council, you also were provided a copy of this today via email, and if you'd prefer to look at it like that, if you have a separate screen.
Okay, thank you. We should have the presentation up if someone would confirm that for me.
Yes.
Okay,
Good.
Thank you. So Mayor and City Council, you do have this document was provided to you a little bit earlier today, provided to you in the form that would attach to the resolution should you approve this or something similar tonight. The presentation is directly taken from that letter form that you received earlier and just put in a more suitable fashion to walk through. So with that, we'll begin. This is your legislative package or agenda. Council would remind that this applies both to the Texas legislature, which is the 87th session, and to the next session of the United States Congress, which would be the 117th Congress. Jumping in now, and this should look like the document you have in your hands, we have a background statement. This statement, Council, has been consistent for at least your last 3 legislative sessions. So this is to communicate with state and federal representatives. Tracking legislative issues are important to ensure the council has a strong voice in legislation and rulemaking that impact city governance and operations. We've changed the form just slightly, so you're still on your first page. We've added a statement of intent. That statement reads, the Lubbock City Council supports active participation and partnerships in the legislative process. The City Council believes that local control is necessary and provides the ability to govern in an effective and efficient manner. So, Mayor, do you want me to stop there? That's a new one, or do we want to wait till the end?
I think we'll let you run through it. I should have done a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to ask everyone to mute, and then when you want to speak, to come off mute and to get my attention, please. That way, I think we'll have the very smallest amount of background noise. If there's not anyone that has a comment on this first page, I'll ask you to continue. Please continue, Mr.
Thank you. So moving accordingly, the City Council affirms to all necessary persons and parties the following positions that will be based on these principles. Number one, the city will work to pass its priority legislation. Number two, the city will oppose any legislation that would erode the governing authority of the duly elected Lubbock City Council. Number three, the city will monitor proposed legislation and take appropriate action to assure the city is able to meet its obligations under the city charter, applicable law, and to provide local services as approved by the city council. Those three statements have been in your prior agendas, as has the first one on this screen. So we're on number 4. The city will oppose the imposition of any state mandates that do not provide for a commensurate level of compensation. You'll see this in greater detail as we jump into the direct points. This is commonly the language regarding unfunded mandates. And again, consistent with your prior efforts. This last listed bullet is a new statement. The city will work with appropriate associations and peer cities to support legislative items that are consistent with the statement and principles contained within these priorities, and to oppose those that are not. So again, that is a new statement added to your agenda for this year. And I've had a slide that disappeared. So let me read to you, Council, you're still on page 1.
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Joy.
That last addition that he made, I just wanted to know what's the purpose of adding that language? What does it do for us?
Thank you. I'll speak to that. I think this does for us several things. Number one, it makes very clear what I believe has historically been implied. That is that there are various associations. The common one would be the Texas Municipal League. It's one we commonly think of. There are numerous others, the Texas Police Chiefs Associations, Building Officials Association of Texas, planning officials in Texas. There are many associations that at times will have positions that are consistent with those that would be adopted by this city council. And the same would apply to peer cities, cities generally of similar size to ours throughout the state. Recognizing the speed and the complexity of the legislative action. In fact, we ended last night with 846 bills already filed. We expect there to be well over 7,500. This just makes it plain that if those other associations or those other cities are also conducting legislative activities and they align with Lubbock's, that we can work with them and add our voice to that, or as appropriate, add their voice to ours.
All right, please continue, Mr. Atkinson.
Okay. And Council, again, I think I've dropped a slide, so I'm going to read direct off the bottom of page 1. There's one very important item we need to have on the table. That statement reads, the City Council recognizes the speed with which the legislative process moves. In order to respond in a timely manner to issues that would fall outside the Council's approved principles, the mayor will consult with 2 council members to direct legislative efforts through the city manager and city attorney offices. This is a statement that was in your most recent legislative agenda. Council may recall that an item came up, an opportunity to clarify some language that was in regards to your municipal court. This was the mechanism by which we were able to get to that and keep it moving within the legislative session. So I'm going to now begin the direct discussion. So we'll start on page 2 of your attachment. The first references those items that the city will initiate. So in this case, we would work with draft legislation, and then we would meet with our delegation and seek a sponsor if ultimately the city adopts this. So we are asking for efforts to allow the city to adopt the vacant building and minimum maintenance standards authority that is allowed to other municipalities. Council, this has been discussed several times. It's a direct recommendation specifically from your newly adopted downtown master plan. And as you may remember, the authority to do this today is limited by population. And I believe the population minimum bracket is a county of 2 million people or more. So obviously Lubbock falls outside of that. If you choose to adopt this, and we are able to seek and receive a sponsor and move it through the process, what you would be doing is opening the window to allow this. Having the legislation to allow it does not have the effect of adopting it locally. That is still a separate action that this council would have to consider at the appropriate time. Thoughts or questions on that?
Looks like Mr. Chavez is teed up here. One.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Talk to me about adopt a vacant building and minimum maintenance. What are we looking at, Jared? Specifically the buildings that are downtown that are boarded up. Where are we headed with this?
Yeah, so Councilman, good question. And recall the examples that were discussed when we had this in front of the council during your downtown master plan were really those from San Antonio. We believe they were the first, or at least the city that moved the quickest. This is really an effort for the downtown area for a vacant building to require certain minimum maintenance. This is mainly going to be on the building face, the part that fronts towards the street, although it could be in greater detail than that. Various options include things like lighting. Options would include things such as not having boarded over openings, be those doors or windows, but rather have something that is it's a building face that matches, or at least similar quality to what's around it.
Thank you. That's what I would envision just by definition that I'm looking at right here. No reason why we should have buildings really in the downtown area that are boarded up for an indefinite amount of time. I've been in town for 9 years and I've been looking at the same storefronts, or I'm sorry, the building fronts boarded up. And it's after 9 years, that's definitely an indefinite amount of time. Thank you for the definition. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Chavez. Ms. Patterson Harris?
Yes, sir. Mr. Manager, City Manager, I have a question. Will there be any restrictions as a part of this potential legislation that restricts it only to downtown areas? Is it something that we can utilize to other parts of the city? Is there anything that prevents that from happening?
I think the decision, if the city is allowed to adopt these standards, I think then the decision as to where to apply those standards is up to the city council.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Atkinson, won't you continue, please?
Yes, sir. So we're going to move into those general items for which we suggest the city stand in support. The first, the designation of Interstate 27 north and south from its current limits. This, of course, is the outshoot of the efforts that began after the 2019, the 86th legislative session, work that many of y'all and certainly Mayor Pope have participated in. Report was delivered to the Texas Transportation Commission. Actually, that report was delivered on the day we did our council planning session. And it does support the need to extend I-27 north and south from its current limits. And, really this is to enhance safety. It's to enhance passenger and freight mobility. And it's to support international trade through Texas. We really only have one major north-south interstate across the state of Texas. It's time to have a second one. I think that program was well done. That legislation by Chairman Perry was well written. And I think the process worked and it worked well. This is the council's opportunity then, should you choose, to support those efforts as they move through the legislative session here locally in Texas, and you will also see it in your federal list. The next point is, of course, directly related. and that is supporting funding to appropriate capital to construct I-27 from its current limits to interstate highway standards. So step one is the designation. Step two is if they're going to make that designation, and it will need to be made both at the federal and the state level, then it's time to start appropriating dollars. This is a decades-long process, but it's waited for decades. It's time to take a move, and staff is suggesting that you provide your support specifically to those two items. The third, ensure that long-term funding for the remaining development and construction of Loop 88 is made available. Certainly, we know the first segments are funded, that generally being the south central pieces of the Loop 88. This is also a long-running project. It has a long way to go to get around. We want to see the state continue their funding and certainly the federal dollars as appropriate. The next item, support Lubbock Power and Light's transition into ERCOT, or the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, and ultimately entrance into the competitive retail market, or what we call choice for electric customers. The next one is a direct follow-up to a bill that was put through during your last session. This one by Chairman Burrows, sometimes called the Wayfair Bill. This speaks to how online sales tax revenue that is collected by the state on behalf of local government is ultimately distributed. This is a bill that's made potentially available to the city online sales tax revenues that were not available previously. As the controller went through the process to put rules in place, it kind of got stalled a little bit over the discussion of, does the sales tax go to origination or to destination? But then it also got stalled by the COVID pandemic. We expect this will come back up to the state legislature. Your staff suggests that the council add its support to distributing these online sales tax revenues to the point of destination. This is we think this is a big deal.
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Joy, I'm sorry, couldn't get to the button. Yes, Latrell.
Okay, in connection with that legislation, there was also a limit on the size or the amount of income received from a business, and they were excluded. Do you recall that? I don't know why we would limit that for any reason. If they are doing sales in our city, regardless of the amount of income they generate, I would think that we would want that restriction removed. Thoughts?
So the piece of the legislation that I believe you're referring to was the quote minimum sales threshold, basically, and this speaks to the marketplace piece of the bill. And that was that sellers, and these primarily would be sellers, to my understanding, that are not here and possibly not even in Texas, that go through a small marketplace. And if that seller's total sales were below a certain threshold, and for some reason $500,000 sticks in my head, but I doubt that's correct. And Mr. Kostelich may be able to pull that and interject for us here in a minute.
I believe that's the number, Mr. Atkinson. That I'm fairly certain that's the number.
Right. So am I hearing a suggestion then that we support efforts to remove that minimum sales threshold?
Yes, because those businesses are competing with our local businesses who do pay sales tax. Our small businesses, all of them pay, but they are definitely competing with our local small businesses. So I would like to see that added.
Mayor, council, other thoughts?
Any other any thoughts? Let's just do it like this. Anybody have a contrary opinion to that? Okay, Mr. Atkinson, could you work with Mr. Satterwhite and maybe add a sentence to that so we could consider that this evening, please?
Yes, sir. We'll have that ready for you.
Okay, thank you. Let's please continue.
We'll go to the next. This has been a long-standing item in your legislative agendas each year, and that is support changes to Chapter 143, Texas Local Government Code, that enhance both the police and the fire chief's authority as it relates to personnel matters. There are some potential bills that are floating around out there. We don't have one to suggest we attach to at this moment, but I certainly expect that they will be coming. The next one is new. This is to support efforts to have a clear definitions regarding deliberation and consideration, and those are specific terms that were created in light of changes in the Texas Open Meetings Act from the last session, and this was specifically House Bill 2840 and Senate Bill 1640. So we're asking for that. I do know that there are some associations interested in getting some clear definitions, and this is really an opportunity, or it's an ask, to make it easy for the governing bodies to be sure they're playing by the rules. The next item, this one is new. This is to ask for the inclusion of larger municipal fire departments in matters that come before the Texas Commission on Fire Protection. So the Texas Commission on Fire Protection has just completed its sunset review, and there will be many changes or suggestions that come out of that sunset review. Part of them do speak to ensuring that TCFP is fully representative to the extent possible from your smallest volunteer unit up to your largest full-time municipal fire department. Our own fire chief is working with a group of chiefs from the larger cities. I expect that group will come up with some specific language. Council, if you accept the language that's on this page, that will allow us to work through that. This is really the group that makes rules, that makes regulations on how we run our fire departments, right down to the types of personal protective equipment that we buy. And I think there's an opportunity for the larger departments to participate in those matters and be sure that we're all getting what we really need, and that we're doing so without an excess regulatory burden. And in this case, burden is not safety, never is. Burden could be cost that possibly wasn't totally necessary. The next item, we want to ensure that qualifying convention hotel projects, that's a term of art, that have been delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic can be completed at the proper time and still with those state rebates. We're still internally working on the most specifics of that. It is likely that our project is in one of the brackets that's not affected. We just want to be extremely certain that that is the case. The next one, this one is new this year. We would ask the council to support efforts that require marketplace providers or facilitators of short-term rentals to remit the local hot tax directly to the appropriate municipality. So council, some of you may recall many, many years ago when we had all the online travel sites, there was a big dispute that ultimately ended up in a very long-running court case about how the local and the state hot taxes were remitted when those online booking places were in a completely different state than where they were going. As we know here, this council has put in place really a registration process for short-term rentals in your community. So relatively minimal regulation compared to what you see in many cities. But today, the burden to pay that local hotel occupancy tax is on each individual owner, excuse me, of that short-term rental. We do know that some marketplace providers are paying the local hot on behalf of their providers directly to cities. Yet we've had a hard time getting that to work. We were very close with the largest provider. And here 3 weeks ago, they said, hey, you know what? There's a pandemic on. We're going to cease negotiations with you. There were certain members, advisory people that spoke to the council when you were looking at that registration that were very strong. This should be sent directly by these platforms, and we're asking council to get behind that, and let's push it through the legislature if the opportunity arises. Next item, this one has been on your prior agendas: improve vehicular and pedestrian safety along Avenue Q or Highway 84 within the city limits. You know, we continue to work with TxDOT. We really look forward to seeing some positive changes on that. The next item has been on your prior agendas to some extent. We've kind of expanded it a little bit. This is efforts to ensure that cities can appropriately manage all utility installations within city right-of-way and to provide for market-based rates. Council knows 2 sessions ago there were some changes that really kind of turned the market-based concept a little bit over on its side. And then, of course, in the prior session, there were some telecom franchise deals. They're not strictly right away the way we're referring to it here, but they also had a negative effect. So we're just saying all utilities and treat them the same. That's what that statement means. The next item, expect to see this as a major topic when the legislature convenes, and that's the expansion of broadband availability throughout Texas. Certainly, it's been on many people's radar for years. I think the pandemic has really heightened the awareness of that. There are some national level groups working on it. We will watch that and keep council informed as it moves forward. But this is good. We want to see this.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Ms. Joy.
On this item, it is also high on the TML legislative program, but the concern I think that the cities have is who's going to pay for it. You know, it's one of those ideas, broadband, which is great and needs to happen, but I think we need to be sure that if we're going to support that, that it be with the understanding that the state pick up the expense and that they not put that over onto the cities, which would not surprise me in the least for that to happen.
So I think that's
Good point.
an excellent point, and I may have that covered when we get to the next section. If not, and if council would prefer, we can come back and expand this particular point and make that plain.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Atkinson, please continue.
Okay, this will complete the list of items we recommend support. Of course, funding for Texas Tech University, the Veterinary School, the Mental Health Institute. Full funding for the Texas Recreation and Parks Account local grant program. Council, we've had significant discussion on the Texas Parks and Wildlife grants. This particular program was originally intended to be funded with a set aside from the sales tax collected on sporting goods. Of course, as we have come out of many of the darker parts of the pandemic, sporting goods sales are really doing very well as an industry. We would like to be sure that that funding that was intended to go to TRPA does go to TRPA. And council, this is also directly related to the city's effort to do the new Parks Master Plan, which of course is one of the key criteria in being able to access those various grant programs. And Mr. Van Gundy talked to us all about that at your planning meeting. The next one, full state funding for mental health treatment. That's been on prior agendas, as has the next one. Creation and funding of state programs to address chronic homelessness. Of course, the state did add dollars to the mental health programs at large in the last session. It was a big step forward. It doesn't get us to the finish line, and we hope that the state will continue to do that. The final one, this is new. This would be efforts to add municipal parks as an eligible use for hotel occupancy tax funding, but we have added a qualifier that if that is done, it should always be subject to local approval. There are certain cities and communities, think of any of your prime visitor spots, your tourism locations. This is really the group that's going to push this item forward. Having it as a tool in the potential toolbox, I think would be a good thing, but not if it's a mandatory spend. That spend should be always subject to the city council. Mayor, with that, that completes the items for which we recommend support. I do have a couple of notes. One is to go back and talk about removing that minimum threshold on the marketplace sellers. And the second is a reminder to come back on broadband and qualify that that's not at city expense. And with that, I would stop, take any comments before we move to the next section.
Thanks, Mr. Atkinson. Council comments or questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Joy,
there
and
is
Mr. Chavez after that. Go ahead, Latrell.
there's some bills out there that mandate certain police functions, how they operate, their equipment, all of that. And I don't know, Mr. Atkinson, if you're going to cover that over in your opposition portion. But there's been a lot of discussion about those bills. And I think as a council, we need to take a position on that issue. For me, it's an issue of local control, and that's included in your opposition. But I think we need a more specific reference, and it doesn't matter where we put it, whether it goes into, we will work in favor of or oppose, but it's a specific issue. If you're reading those bills that are already filed, you should be a little nervous about it. So that's my comment.
So duly noted, and I do not have a specific call out. I believe the topic is generally referred to as police reform.
Yes.
As the council member has noted, the ones that are out there today are pretty wide ranging. Some of them on their face appear to be very logical, to make good sense. Some of them maybe not quite so much. So if we could, I've made a note of that. Let me work on that in my head as we get through the end. I think it really needs to be supporting something, some type of, police reform that's subject to the local control and approval. So can we hold that for a moment, or if anybody else has thoughts, I'd love to have them.
I just have one comment. When we discussed that at the legislative meeting, there was, from all of the cities, there was overwhelming support that we keep that in the local arena, as opposed to some sort of mandate that every city do the exact same things. And then there was also the issue of who pays for what if you do mandate, but that's covered over in your opposition language.
Yes, and of course, Chief Mitchell is very involved with the Texas Police Chiefs Association, and they're reviewing and analyzing this same topic as it moves forward. Council members, any other thoughts before we move?
I think Mr. Chavez had a question or comment. Mr. Chavez?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Atkinson, that was, I think, as a previous slide, you made reference to Avenue Q, otherwise known as, Highway 84, otherwise known as Avenue Q. Improving pedestrian and vehicular safety. Now, for public information, Highway 84 or Avenue Q, DOT owns that, right? Or
That is correct.
How does that
It
work?
is. You're correct. That is a highway. Thus, it is under control and jurisdiction of the Texas Department of Transportation. I think all of us are aware, especially as it relates to pedestrian safety. There have been fatal accidents up and down the stretch that's within the city limits, and we're talking, primarily from 34th north. Although within the last 24 months there was one just south of the intersection at 50th Street. There are a
Yes.
couple of installations of what are called the Hawks, which are the pedestrian crossing signals that set off the flashing red, solid red light to try to allow that. But Avenue Q has relatively high speed limits. As you get to 19th and you go north, you have numerous cross streets, numerous traffic signals, numerous driveways. We just think there's a better way, to do that. I think the ultimate game would possibly be that it becomes off system and done in cooperation with TxDOT. It moves over to city, but I think we're quite a ways away, at least financially, from making that happen right now.
Okay, so currently as it stands, in order for us to do any improvements, now do we need DOT permit, or does DOT work on our recommendations at their cost? How does that work?
It can be done both, but any changes, any modifications, even basic maintenance to Avenue Q, I'll just call it that, those are subject to DOT, Texas Department of Transportation. We do have a cooperative agreement with them on the traffic signals and the Hawk devices. But that's really it. The street lighting project that you may recall from just a little over a year ago, that was entirely a TxDOT project. There was a seal coat done on the segment from 19th to Marcia Sharp. That was a TxDOT project. Would note that your local district office has been working with us to try to find ways to really change that and make it better. But again, we're not within our fiscal limits, and I don't believe that TxDOT is either to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. I just want to share some information with the public that's out there listening. It's not as simple as we decide we're going to do something on an Avenue Q. Because
You are
of DOT.
correct.
Okay, just good information. Thank you for sharing with the public. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jadis. Okay, Mr. Atkinson, please continue.
Okay, thank you. Let's kind of move into the next segment. This segment's a little bit shorter, thankfully. I want to talk first. This is an entirely new point. It is limits. We will oppose limits on effective municipal participation in the legislative process and the ability to hire representatives with public funds to represent the city in accordance with this duly adopted agenda on matters that impact the city or our residents. Allow me to give a little background. Most of this, council, you're well aware of. Number one, from Citizens Tower to the corner of Congress Avenue in front of the Texas State Capitol is 373 miles. With nothing in the way, that's 5 hours and 52 minutes by car, at least according to the Google Map program. And unfortunately, based on common airline schedules, you're about the same minimum time away by airplane. I say that to highlight this. Last session, there were over 7,500 bills that were filed in the Texas legislature. Approximately 2,000 of those bills, in one manner or another, were city related. Many of those not what are the common hot topics, such as tax reform and items like that, but they really are bills that affect the normal operations of a city, how you run a water system, how you run a wastewater system, what you can and cannot do in parks, liability associated with parks, with police, with fire, workers' compensation to protect our first responders, things as simple as platting of land. Certainly we're all aware of the annexation fights that went on. That's past us. But I highlight this to say the Texas legislature meets for 140 days. And that group of women and men have a tremendous task in front of them. And they're there. We're not. And every day bills are filed that could have an effect on us, have an effect on our rates, our water rates, you know, whatever we may be doing. Having the ability to be able to effectively participate, we would suggest is a fundamental right of cities. Attempting to do that from this distance and this time away from the capital is impractical. Just as cities, counties, even the state government, we all hire experts to help us in many different manners of the business that we conduct. We think it's very important that we be able to do that to help us participate in the legislative process. So we are talking about lobbyists. We know that taxpayer funded lobbying or anti-taxpayer funded lobbying is the common term. That will be a major topic. There's already a Senate committee that will be meeting on December the 10th. They were going to meet in November and they postponed till December. I said the 10th, I believe it's actually the 7th. And it's starting on that. For the city not to have access to professionals to help us do this, I think long-term has a very negative effect on our ability to participate in the process. And that's all we're suggesting with this item. Mayor, that's a new one and a pretty big one. Do you want me to stop on it before I keep moving?
Yeah, I'd like you to sort of maybe for the council do a little what if. So if legislation like this were to be passed, how would we protect the interest of our citizens as going forward? What would this potentially require a future council to do, Mr. Atkinson?
That's an excellent point, Mayor. So I'm going to pull up a separate document while we talk, but without the ability to hire a firm that is in Austin, it would require the city of Lubbock to hire staff. And I'm going on the language that was in one of the bills that did not go through during the last session. It would require us to hire staff and for all practical purposes to place them in Austin, at least during the weekdays early on in the session, and likely 7 days a week later in the session. Your current lobby contract is $138,000 a year total. For that, we get an entire firm that's located just a few blocks from the Capitol, has multiple professionals that are able to do bill tracking, that are able to provide us notice of hearings, able to assist myself or my staff if we are called to testify or if we need to go to testify. They provide that same service to the city council. To do that without that help would result, at my best guess, in needing a minimum of 2 employees, very significant travel expense, very significant lodging expense to keep them there as the process goes forward. Something that sometimes maybe doesn't get noticed as well as the session moves towards the end. And again, your legislators are working on just a tremendous number of bills, hearings, matters read on the floor, referred to committee, matters heard in committee, moved back into the calendars group, scheduled for a second, a third read. Often at the end of the session, the legislature has need to call various hearings to cure a matter, to go back and address an item maybe that wasn't previously addressed. And that happens by necessity at very, very short notice, very short notice. Without having access to people working on our behalf that are there, we would have to provide that on our own. And then the further question to me, as I look at a financial impact, if we had to pick this effort up with city staff, the legislature only meets every 2 years. And granted, there's a lot of interim work that goes on. There are interim committees, but not at the intensity, not at the speed, and often not always in Austin that occurs during that interim. So we're going to have relatively expensive personnel that are going to have one portion of their job extremely intense and the rest of it maybe much less. Now, granted, we can find other items at which those folks could assist us with, but to be effective at the legislature requires a lot of knowledge, requires a lot of access, requires an ability to know which committee is going to hear which bill and which way you need to work on that. So the short version, Mayor, I think it would cost us substantially more than what we pay today. And I think at least at the onset of such a shift, the ability to be effective would probably be reduced.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson.
Okay. I don't hear any.
Yeah, let's continue.
Questions?
Let's go ahead and continue, please.
The next one, new limits.
Can you hear me yet?
Yes, I can get you, Go ahead, Mr. Christian. I'm sorry.
I'm trying, well, I apologize. I'm having to do a little workaround on my mute and unmute. So, but anyway, I just wanted to comment on this. And after Mr. Atkinson had gone over some of the potholes that we might face if this sort of legislation is passed. And I think that it is for any, in my opinion, any legislative representative who supports this does not have the best interests of Lubbock and its citizens. Let me make that statement right up front. Also, I think that we, all cities, whether it's Lubbock or others, should have the complete authority over how we want our representation to take place during the legislative session in regards to people being able to attend meetings for us and provide information to us, as Mr. Atkinson has alluded to just a few moments ago. I think that this is vitally important for us for all the reasons Mr. Atkinson said, but I think it's incumbent on us as a council and staff to make sure that we are very intentionally and very strongly getting the message out to our constituents of why this is important. So many times this sort of thing is twisted in ways that makes our council and our staff not in the best of light. And it's back to what I've said a number of times. We either communicate by default, and we don't want to communicate by default. We want to make sure that we're in control of the message. And I think it's very, very important for us to maybe even put together a plan of how we communicate this to the citizens of Lubbock, Texas. This is very, very, very important. And I'll now be asked to be muted and I'll pass the ball on to you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Christian.
Mr. Mayor, I found my mute button. I tell you what concerns me about this attempt to limit the use of public funds. Would they also try to say that we could not hire staff, our own staff, to do that because they're being paid with public funds?
Council member, I can only go back to the bill that was presented in the 86 session. It did not, and that was, if we're talking strictly dollars and cents, that was the interesting thing. It would not prevent a staff member, an elected official from doing this. It was focused on, at the moment, taxpayer dollars. Now that can be defined in a lot of different ways, but taxpayer funds to hire a third party to do it. And it also had language that would have, in my opinion, it would have impacted associations. And again, the Texas Municipal League, or in the county world, the Texas Association of Counties, gains all the attention. But those are far from the only associations that our professionals work with that really are the subject matter experts in their particular field. Mentioned one earlier, Building Official Association of Texas, Texas Police Chief Association. Those all have a member due that we pay to participate and to gain access to their knowledge.
Are we members of the Texas Business Association?
No, but the Lubbock Chamber is. Texas Association. You're talking about Texas Association of Business?
Tab.
Yeah, TAB. Yeah.
Okay.
Chamber's a very active member, yes.
Okay.
I guess many of us as chamber members, or a number of us as chamber members, are in some ways members of it. Yes, through our businesses.
Mayor,
Yes, sir. Mr. Griffith.
thank you. I do have a question. Mr. Atkinson, does the state of Texas utilize representatives or lobbyists in Washington, D.C. at the federal level?
I do not know the answer to that.
The answer is yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
I think the other thing, we could go into this a lot, but the legislation that was proposed in the 86th session was targeted at cities and counties. It had, Mr. Atkinson, correct me where I'm wrong, but it had colored out school districts, hospital districts, water districts, higher education, community colleges, among others. The language was written pretty much right at cities and counties.
Yes, sir.
Okay, please continue.
Next item, oppose new limits on city fiscal authority, including additional appraisal or revenue caps or lowered rollback requirements. So council, you just completed and adopted your first budget that was under the rules established by Senate Bill 2, the property tax reform bill from last time. Key features of that really were lowering the rollback threshold from the 8%, same revenue, same properties, down to 3.5%. And second, it also made the rollback election not subject to petition, but automatic if you went more than the 3.5%, same property, same revenue. We did that during a pretty rough time this year. And of course, we came in well underneath that bill. So cities, counties, and others have had exactly one session underneath that. We think we can live with that and make it work. It's tight, but we can do it. Doing anything additional, I think would create quite a bit of unintended consequence. So we're asking for you to consider that statement there. Directly related would be new limits on the use or calculations involving the issuance of certificates of obligation. This was an item that was brought up late in the SB2, HB2 discussions at the committee level. Ultimately, that did not end up going in, but I would not be surprised to see at least discussion of that come back forward again. What we have works, and it's transparent and it's responsible. Of course, any debt issuance issued by the city, be it a certificate of obligation, a bond, whatever, those are all subject to approval through the Texas AG's office, as well as numerous notice requirements and other items. So the system works. And if there is abuse in the system, there already exists an incredible body of law that can be used to address those abuses. So we're asking that stay the way it is.
Mr. Atkinson, if you would let's try to pick up tempo just a hair, if you would, just to give me our time. Okay, thank you.
So we're just about to the end. These are your more general statements. We oppose limits on home rule or local control. Limits on the municipal authority that's commonly called preemption or super preemption bills. We do expect to see those back again. Oppose increased pass-through or regulatory fees collected for or on behalf of the state. Common example there is your municipal court. The most significant part of a court fine that's assessed by your local municipal court is actually payable to the state, and that's a first dollar to the state. Oppose removing the city's original jurisdiction in utility rate making proceedings or the ability to recover those expenses. Council, you're working through two of those right now with two providers of natural gas. We like the state and regional water planning and state and regional flood planning processes. Let's let those work. Of course, the flood planning process is new. also championed by our local Senator, Charles Perry. Those are good programs. Keep them going. We would oppose a reduction or limits on the event trust fund program. Lubbock is able to take advantage of that for smaller events, but it provides funding back to us that can be reinvested back into events at your local level. I'll jump into your federal list, and this will be the final slide. At the congressional level, we would support always additional funding for mass transportation and your highway systems. You see the same language regarding I-27. This is both for designation, design, and funding. Maintain funding for the Community Development Block Grant and the Home Partnership programs. Your final bullet is new. That is directing COVID-19 related financial assistance direct to municipalities regardless of population. Your city handles millions of dollars a year that are direct from the federal government. We take those through every accountability program, your various audits, consolidated and annual financial reports, and else. There's no reason we cannot do the same with COVID-19 related funding. Mayor, that takes me through the end of the presentation. Take any additional comments you may have.
I'll open the floor for comments. I'm thankful for Mr. Atkinson for your work and council for all your input on this. Several of you have been very involved, and particularly Ms. Joy. And so if there are no further comments, what we'll see tonight will be when we get to item, I believe it's item 8.3, we will see the updated version of this. I'll ask Mr. Atkinson tonight to go through those changes so we can make sure that they changes in addition, so they make sure they pass muster as to what we have suggested. Okay. Everybody all right with that? Okay. I don't see anybody. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Let's move to the second item on work session. It's an update from our CFO regarding results of recent bond sales. And then also a quick look back at FY 19-20 sales tax collections for the city of Lubbock. Mr. Kostelich, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. Good to be with you today to share some good financial results related to all of our recent bond refunding transactions and our FY 20 sales tax. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, Mayor. All right, so starting first with our 2020 bond refunding results. If you recall, it was just about 2 weeks ago that we came to you with the parameters ordinance to go forward with a series of refundings for both the city on the city's credit and on our wastewater credit. So back here today to present the results of that. And Mayor, just to let you know, we hit a very good day in the market. It was a day where equities started sliding, so there was a little bit of a flight to quality. So your bonds are going to be very attractive on those days. So good results on this day. So first, starting with the 2020 general obligation refunding series, this was a taxable advance refunding. As we presented to council, the summary of what we expected is on the left. If you look on the right side of the screen, the actual results are presented. So we did have $32.69 million of bonds that we pulled back and refunded. While we were expecting about a 2% interest on this, we actually came back because of the interest in our bonds at a 1.65% all in true interest cost. So that led to some increased savings that you'll see at the bottom of the screen. While we were expecting about 1.9 million, that actually came back $811,000 more at almost 2.7 million. So that as a percentage of present value savings on those refunded bonds went from a 5.7 expectation to an 8.2%. So very, very good results on that day. Now we often get asked the question of who is actually buying our bonds, who's interested in these. And so we wanted to pull that out for you. And on a taxable series, these are going to be equivalent to your treasuries out in the market. So with a little bit higher yields than what treasuries are providing, you're going to have a lot of interest from a lot of different investor groups. So on these accounts, you can see on the right, your insurance groups are always going to be the bulk of your bond buying. But you're going to have broker dealers, money managers, private wealth managers, property trading groups, bank portfolios, and you'll have a lot of municipal and government investors interested in these bonds. So as far as individual companies and investment managers out there who are buying these bonds, you'll see on the left who all is placing orders on our bonds. These are only the top 10, but New England Asset Management, Stifel Nicholas, so on and so forth. So very, very good diversity in who is looking at our credit. It really speaks to the credit worthiness of the city of Lubbock being at AA+ and being in the market. Our name is known, and investors really like what we provide. So quick summary of the 2020 GO refundings. We had $29.5 million of orders, and only, like I said, 32.7 million available. So that was almost 9 times oversubscribed. 47 investment accounts participated in this. That means 47 different groups were placing orders for that total of almost 830 million. That led to the $2.7 million net present value savings, which equates to about $207,000 per year. The all-in transfers cost was 1.65%. That's on 13-year basis. Now remember, and I know Ms. Joy brings this up quite often, when we refund, we do not extend the terms of these bonds. So whatever we are refunding matures at the same time. So like I said, that is a 13-year transaction. And at the present value savings of 8.23%.
Mr. Koslitz, go back if you would, please,
Yes,
sir. Those are awful good numbers. That oversubscription percentage would be a lot higher than 9 times. Maybe one of those numbers is not. I know the 32.7 is right, but that would be nearly 30 times, right? So in somewhere in that range, something like that. Oversubscribed.
It would, Mayor. It really depends on the way the oversubscriptions works. Is based upon the series throughout the year. So
Gotcha.
if you're well oversubscribed in one, it doesn't necessarily mean you're oversubscribed in all.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
All right. So moving on to the water wastewater revenue credit, we had 2 series out that day. One was a tax exempt current refunding, and the 2020C was a taxable advance refunding. So first on the tax exempt, another good day, $27.2 million of refunding bonds. Expected a 1.3% interest. We came back at a 0.84% interest. So very, very good results on that. That led to an increase in your PV savings of 837,000 over what was expected to almost a 2.6 million. Brings your percentage of PV savings up from 6.3 to 9.5%. Now in your tax exempt, you're going to have a little bit different array of buyers on these. Some of these will be the same names, but they're looking at it for different purposes. You know, really when you're looking at tax exempt bonds in the market, you're looking at portfolios like a lot of retirement portfolios, bond funds out there that separately managed accounts that are looking for the tax exempt credits. They need some money that is the tax-free money. So that's who's going to really be in the market for these bonds. So you're going to see your Eaton Vance's, your Goldman Sachs, Nuveen, your Black Rocks, some of those larger names are going to be ordering a lot of these for their clients, private wealth managements, the high net worth individuals, and some of the index funds that you'll see out there. So overall, $243 million in orders on 27.2 million. So that's again 8.9 times oversubscribed on these as well. 30 different accounts participated for a savings, total savings of 2.6 million. So that's $288,000 per year on this series alone. All in true interest cost of 0.84% on 9 years. So excellent result there with a present value savings of 9.51%. Moving to the taxable series, again, very similar results on the true interest cost out there. The bump that we saw from that was from a 2.1% interest expected down to a 1.79%. Great results, $516,000 increase in our net PV savings from expected to what actually came in. What actually came in was almost $1.5 million on this. Moves your percent PV savings up from 4.4 to 6.6, almost 6.7%. So good results on that. And this taxable is going to be the same as your, the same makeup, the same breakdowns, the same buyers as what's on the general obligation side. It really is just a matter of preference at that point, whether the buyer is wanting a revenue back credit or a tax back credit. So that's just the only difference in what they're looking for. But this is again going to be your insurance, your money managers, your broker dealers, separately managed accounts. And you will see one new name in here, Chicago Metropolitan Water Authority. That was really our big municipal and government that put in an order of $7 million on this deal. So $145 million of orders on 22.1 million available, so 6.6 times oversubscribed. 31 investment accounts were active in this transaction for a total PV savings of 1.5 million or 123,000 per year. The true interest cost at just shy of 1.8% over 12 years, and a PV savings of 6.65%. Now, Mayor and Council, there was one more refunding that was outside of us, but also happened within the last month, and that was the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority revenue bond refunding their Series 2020, which was another tax-exempt refunding. So this was presented it was presented back in July, but the transaction didn't actually occur until October. That was a parameters ordinance that you all authorized as part of CREMWA for their staff to go forward with. So they actually executed this in October. So what was presented to council, the Lubbock portion was about 16.5 million of their total $51.8 million transaction. The true interest cost that was anticipated was about 1.43%. It actually came in at 1.3, so a good little savings of 12 basis points there. Which increased the net PV savings from 3.3 million up to about 3.58, 3.6 million. So very good percent of PV savings, an increase of 1.6% up to 18.45. So on the water, there were 3 series of refundings on the water side. And that relates to a total water, wastewater net present value savings of $7.6 million between the water and wastewater and the city credit. We have effectively refinanced our bonds to save $10.3 million in these 4 transactions. So very, very good results. And Mayor, I'm going to stop there before I get into sales tax and ask if there are any questions.
On the CREMWA, what's the age of those bonds?
Those were 20-year bonds. And that was current refunding. So they had 10 years left,
Okay.
and they
thank
still
you.
have 10 years left.
Right. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Other questions? Okay, Mr. Cost, let's look at the sales tax number.
Some more good news on the year-end sales tax. Despite the year that we had of the COVID pandemic, in the chart that you're going to see, the bar graphs are your monthly results. The red being the fiscal year 2019. The previous year, the blue bar is the fiscal year 20. The lines are the cumulative. So blue is again fiscal year 20, red is fiscal year 19. So we ended the year just shy of $74 million, as opposed to last year's $71.6 million. So that was a $2.3 million increase in sales tax this year, which is a 3.3% year-over-year growth. You know, if you really look at the bar charts and month to month, what you're going to see is Q1, October to December, we came out of the gate very, very strong. Sales tax was up about 9.3% in our first quarter fiscal year. January and February, again, were slightly better than the previous year, but not to the same extent. And then March and April is where we had the stay-at-home orders that came on, which we knew would hurt our sales tax dollars. To the extent that they did, we were anticipating a lot more. So we did see in March a drop of 390,000 year over year, and then in April 650,000 year over year. So quite a bit of room given back during those 2 months. But then May, as we started reopening and loosening the stay-at-home orders, we started seeing sales tax jump back up a little bit. But then in June, we saw a $680,000 year-over-year increase. So very, very strong performance. I feel like that is a lot of pent-up demand, people coming in, shopping. A lot of our stores resulted in that large jump to offset some of what we lost back in March and April. I say pent-up demand because July and August and then September kind of start following the same trend of gradual increases year over year. But overall, very, very good results despite the loss that we saw during the 2 months of the stay-at-home orders.
Okay. I think, Mr. Koslich, you could bring news like that every meeting, 24 times a year. We could schedule you 15 minutes, okay?
Sounds good, Mayor. Sounds good.
Okay. Any questions for Blue? You know, I think back to Ms. Joy, Mr. Griffith, you'll particularly appreciate this, but I think back to a time nearly 5 years ago when we didn't have a CFO, and I'm thankful for the approach that Mr. Atkinson, Mr. Koslich, and their team take to the finance aspect of our business, and whether it's managing our deposits or managing, making sure that we're managing our portfolio, our debt portfolio, or just reporting out something like this, which is easy for us to understand, and I think easy for citizens to understand. I'm very thankful. Looks like Ms. Joy, you have a comment.
Amen. That's it. Amen.
Mr. Griffith.
Yes, I would second that amen. Ms. Joy just said. Blue, thank you, and Jared, thank y'all very much, and we do appreciate it. This is great news considering what we've been through.
Okay, Council, that takes care of our items for work session. I don't believe we've had any pulls, although with this doing this remotely, I want to make certain that we didn't miss something and that there's not something that one of you would like to have pulled off the consent agenda. Mr. Atkinson, you're good, right? Nothing from staff?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, no pools then, council. Any questions about items that are on the regular agenda? I guess there's only three. We've talked about one in depth. We're posted to talk about, I think, a second one in executive session. So, okay, I don't see any of those. All right, so it is it's 3:49. The Lubbock City Council will hold executive session today for the purpose of consulting with city staff regarding the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property under section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code. Also to discuss personnel matters under section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code. And finally, to discuss commercial or financial information as it relates to economic development under section 551.087 of the Texas Government Code. It is 3:50. Lubbock City Council is recessed to executive session. Council, I would remind you to leave this meeting and join the executive session link that's been provided in your Zoom or in your email.
Pastor Wolfington, this is Mark. I just got a message from Jarrett that it's going to be about 10 more minutes.
Did you say 10 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that's what they've said is just about 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Pastor Wolfington, this is Mark again. The mayor said that they will reconvene at 4:55.
Okay, just to let you know, I am traveling west from Lubbock, and I know the cell service gets kind of spotty in places, so I'm hopeful this is going to turn out okay since we're running late.
We'll do the best we can.
Yep, no problem. I appreciate the
All
opportunity.
right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, it is 4:55. And it appears that we have 5 of our 7 members are back. We're waiting on Mr. Griffith and Mr. Christian. As soon as they join us, we will, there's Mr. Griffith. And I know that our pastor is traveling. And so we're hoping that we can catch Matt while he is we'll catch Matt here in just a minute while he's still in range. Good afternoon, Pastor Wolfington. How are you?
Great. How about all of you today?
We're doing great. Bear with us for just one moment. We'll get started. We're waiting on one member. We're going to go ahead and return to our meeting. It's 4:58, and Lubbock City Council has returned from executive session. We're going to do our open with our invocation, followed by the pledges of allegiance, and then after that, we'll gavel in for our regular meeting. I welcome you all to our meeting, and I'm thankful that we have Pastor Matt Wolfington with St. Luke's United Methodist Church. And Matt's going to lead us in a word of prayer. Following his prayer, the Mayor Pro Tem, the Mayor Pro Tem, I'm just looking at the wrong Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Massengale will lead us in the pledges to the American and Texas flag. So I'd like to ask Pastor Wolfington to lead us in a word of prayer. Matt? Matt, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. Okay, well, let's wait on the invocation for a moment and see if we have any luck connecting with Mr. Wolfington after the pledges. Mr. Massengale, would you lead us in the pledges, please, sir?
Sure, if you're able to stand. Join me in the pledges of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
to the flag United States
of the States of
America,
America,
and to the republic
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
one nation,
under God,
under God,
Indivisible.
Now the pledge to the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state,
Under God.
Under God,
one
and
and
indivisible.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Let's, looks like we may have lost Mr. Yearwood. Did we lose Mr. Wolfington?
Yes, sir, we did.
Okay, well, our starting late put him in a problem and he told us that it would. So council, if you just, maybe he's coming back here. Hold a sec. Looks like I see him coming back in. Matt, can you hear us? Pastor, can you hear us? Okay. Pastor, please accept my apologies for our meeting starting late. We're thankful for your willingness to open our meeting with a word of prayer. We'll reschedule you very soon. We wish you and your family and your parishioners a very Merry Christmas. Council, are there any volunteers to open us with a word of prayer?
Mayor, I will.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Griffith. I appreciate that.
If you'll bow your heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for life. Thank you so much for this city. Please help us as we go through these tough times in this pandemic. Please let us remember our first responders, our healthcare workers. Please help us remember the families that have lost loved ones. Dear Lord, help us to do the right things for our city. Most of all, give us hope, give us compassion, give us patience. Thank you for everything we have. Thank you so much. In his name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Thank you again, Mr. Massengale. It's 5:03. I'll call the Lubbock City Council to order in our regular December meeting. Today is Tuesday, the 1st of December. Just as a reminder, in December, as in November, we move our meetings from the second and fourth week of the month to the first and third meeting. So first and third week of the month happens to be that the first Tuesday falls on the 1st of December. So this month we will meet on the 1st and the 15th. So we thank you for joining us today in a all virtual video conference council. All 7 council members are in attendance. As well, we're joined by our senior staff, and we will get along with the business of the city. Our first item is item 5 on our agenda, citizen comments. A little bit different process, and I'll read this, go through this just to remind people, since we'll be doing this again on the 15th and likely for the foreseeable future. A citizen wishing to address the council regarding any matter posted on the council agenda below today's agenda, or the agenda on the 15th, may submit a comment by email at citizencomments@mylubbock.us no later than 2 p.m. on the date of the meeting. Today certainly would have been 2 p.m. today. Submitted comments must include name and address. Each comment will be read aloud for a period of time not to exceed 3 minutes, which is consistent with our city council rules. Citizen comments are an opportunity, or is an opportunity for citizens to make comments and express positions on an agenda item. So remember that a comment that is made that is asking a question or is weighing in on something that's not on our agenda will be handled another way by city staff. Will be followed up in that regard. But we'll make sure that citizen comments via email are just like ones that we accept live. Really the rules stay the same, but instead of being live, we ask you to email your comments in by 2 o'clock on the day of the meeting. Okay. Council will move to item 6. The minutes are this item. They begin on page 103. The minutes from the September 23rd, 2020 special city council meeting at the Lubbock Economic and Development Alliance meeting, the October 2020 special city council meeting at the Electric Utility Board, and the November 2nd, 2020 regular city council meeting were all included with this week's agenda. To begin discussion, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chidas. Council, are there additions or corrections to the minutes that are presented in the agenda package? Okay, hearing none. The motion, there's a motion on the floor to approve these minutes as presented. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed by that same sign? Ms. Garza, that passes 7-0. The consent agenda is next tonight. It's item 7 on the agenda. The consent agenda is comprised of items that are considered to be routine and are enacted by one motion without separate discussion. If the city council desires to discuss an item, that item is pulled or removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Council, I don't believe we have any pulls tonight. I'll just confirm that one more time.
I have none.
Okay, I don't see any. So that being the case, Mr. Massengale, I see your mute is off. Can I get a motion from you to begin consideration of item 7?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Joy, thank you for that second. Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Council, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 If there are any opposed, we'd like to hear from you by the same token. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, we'll now move to to the regular agenda. It's number 8 on tonight's order of worship. It begins with item 8.1 on page 392. Item 8.1 is an item from the Lubbock Reese Development Authority, Redevelopment Authority Board of Directors. They need a new member. They had a member resign, and they've got an open position. I will open the floor for a motion to begin our consideration of this. Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to appoint Tim Collins to the Lubbock Reese Redevelopment Authority Board of Directors.
I'll
Okay.
second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Griffith, a second by Mr. Massengale. Are there other appointments? Any other nominations, I guess I should say? Okay. So council, we've, in form of a motion, we have a motion to appoint Tim Collins to the Lubbock Reese Redevelopment Authority Board of Directors. There's a second to that motion. Is there further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed by the same sign? Okay, that motion carries 7-0. We'll now move to item 8.2. 8.2 is an item that comes to us from code enforcement. Before we begin discussion on this, I'll open the floor for a motion.
Move for approval?
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson Harris. Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Steve O'Neill is going to walk us through this item. Mr. Yearwood, do you show Mr. O'Neill available?
Yes, sir. I just promoted him. He should be good to go.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. O'Neill. Steve, I believe you're muted at the moment.
There we go.
There you go.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. It's good to see you all again. Yes, item 8.2 is an amendment to Chapter 36, Streets, Sidewalks, and Other Public Ways of the Code of Ordinances. And this is specifically Article 36.01, which deals with maintenance of those right-of-ways. It's become necessary to amend the code in this regard because we've had some enforcement challenges with regard to items in the right-of-way, particularly as it relates to alleys. And we feel like that the amendment to this ordinance or to this code of ordinances, I should say, in this regard will assist us in our enforcement activities and will also better inform our citizens of what is and is not allowed in the right-of-ways. So to just walk you through this real quick, Section 36.01.005 adds language that will now include alleys in addition to sidewalks and parkways and the requirements for abutting property owner maintenance. It also extends the responsibility to maintain to abutting tenants or lessees, not just property owners, where applicable. And you'll see that particular language change throughout that particular article. Provides that shrubs and bushes, trees, and other plantings within the right-of-way of any street or alley shall not impede the passage of vehicular traffic, and provides for a duty to trim overhanging tree branches and limbs to a minimum specified height that had not existed before. Section 36.01.006 provides that special users, and special users is generally meant to be contractors performing work on adjacent properties, have a duty to ensure that alleys, sidewalks, parkways, curbs, driveways, etc., are kept safe and unobstructed, and that they be restored to their original condition upon completion of work. An important note here is that this is separate and distinct from contractors that are permitted to work in the right-of-way and follow that particular permitting process under Article 36 of the Code of Ordinances. That's an entirely separate process, and they're highly regulated by the Public Works Department. Section 36.01.009 sets forth examples of specific items which may not obstruct the alley or right-of-way, except as may be otherwise authorized by a right-of-way construction permit or a street or alley use license. So a lack of specificity there has been kind of a problem for our homeowners and other adjacent property owners. So we provided some specific examples there. Section 36.01.10 provides that violation of the ordinance is deemed a public nuisance, subject to abatement by the city and recovery of expenses, similar to what we would have, on private property. But it also reserves the right to the city to immediately remove any violation in the right-of-way at our sole cost and expense. We really have that right anyway, but we want to spell it out in the ordinance so that the public is on notice. And that is really the sum and substance of the ordinance, folks. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Mr. Atkinson, you want to add anything to that before we go to council?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. O'Neill, City Attorney's Office, several others have worked through this. I think the changes are necessary and certainly urge your support.
So my understanding of this is we largely need this in alleys where we have underground utilities. Is that, Mr. O'Neill, is that where we see most of the problems?
Well, sir, it's primarily in the alleys where we are seeing the problems. We do have property owners that will maintain certain items in the alley, such as firewood racks. We'll see contractors installing irrigation system components in the alleys where they should be on the private property side of that property line. Also, we've seen such strange examples as pool and spa equipment installed in the alley right away. We've seen bollards or guard posts installed out there to protect the things they've illegally put out in the right of way. All of these things are a hindrance to our solid waste vehicles. And so it's become something that we've kind of seen evolve over time and get a little worse. And of course, we've always had the vegetation problem and not really had a solid standard, for anyone to follow.
So what's the, if somebody said, okay, now remind me, I know that we, as a homeowner, I own to the middle of that alley, but there's a right of way that I've, given to the city. What's that width in the alley?
Well, sir, it's actually not that way. Kind of the way you described it, there would be more of an easement situation.
Easement. Okay, excuse me. Wrong word. Right. Okay.
Yes, sir. The property owner actually only owns up to the rear of their property line there, which then begins the right of way of the alley, which is typically 20 feet wide.
Okay.
And if we have a paved alley, that's typically a 10-foot pavement section centered in that 20-foot right of way. All of our utility assignments typically go in, one side or the other. And in the case of sewer, for example, it may go down the middle of that. This is less of an issue for trying to protect utilities than it is one of trying to maintain appropriate clearance for solid waste vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Patterson-Harris.
Does it apply to areas where there happens to be a lot of, what do you call it? Overhang from trees over roadways?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
So what is our stance on that? How do we handle that? Because I'm thinking of a particular area.
Well, what this would do is it set forth some specific requirements for overhanging tree limbs and branches. It would require that they be trimmed up to a height of 12 feet above a vehicular pathway and 8 feet above a pedestrian pathway. And we already do have language in another section of the Lubbock Code that prevents, in general, tree branches and limbs from obstructing traffic or obscuring a traffic signal device. This just provides some standards that are enforceable and a little easier to follow if you're a homeowner.
So now that they're in place, when we have these issues, we can basically address them with a little bit more punch.
We can, as a matter of fact, it would be easier to issue a citation that would be held up in court, for example, if it were challenged. And it would also provide us with, and this is important, with abatement capabilities. If we had to go in and do the work ourselves, we could assess the cost against the abutting property.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Christian.
Steve, I'm going to assume that most property lines are probably the fence line as well. Is that pretty close to being accurate on most alleys? I'm talking alleys right now.
Generally, yes.
So we have some of these people that are putting pool equipment on the backside of that fences.
We have seen it, yes.
Is that, and other things that you're talking about, but in particularly in the pool equipment. Where are they getting the notion that they can do that? I mean, obviously they're probably having a pool contractor that should know better than that. So I'll ask that question, but then also, what are we going to do to let contractors and other people know that this ordinance, if it passes, if we agree to it, goes into effect? And so we won't be going back to somebody that does this and put it outside the pool equipment outside their fence. So we avoid bigger problems that we already have. And
Well,
I'll
sir,
listen.
and let me point out to all of you, the pool equipment example I gave you is an extreme example that we've not seen much of. You know, in my, I guess, nearly 19 years here, I may have seen that 2 or 3 times. What is more prevalent by far is irrigation system equipment. And also what's very prevalent is water filtration equipment. You know, that is something that some companies do as standard practice, is coming back in and putting water filtration and water treatment system equipment in the right of way, you know, which is a prohibited activity. So what we would need to do is identify, you know, the primary culprits there, for lack of a better term, and notify them of the new standards, the new requirements, as best we can.
Mr. Chavez.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. O'Neill,
Yes, sir.
just a little point of clarification on easements, basically touching on what Ms. Patterson Harris touched on. On the street corner, there's a stop sign. There's a tree somehow got planted on the easement. It is impeding the vision or the visual of that stop sign. Now, that's on the property owner, correct?
It is. It is.
Okay.
We've got actually now in place this provision, if it passes, that would provide some specific requirements that have to be met. But in another section of the Code of Ordinances, and I don't have that committed to memory right now, there is also a more general requirement that traffic signs and traffic signals may not be obscured by vegetation.
Exactly. Okay, so the city goes in there, they do the abatement. The cost of that abatement now goes to the property owner, if I understood that properly.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, let's suppose that the crew is going out there to do some abatement. Does the property owner get I think you said it, they get a notice that this is fixing to happen? They do have time to do the remediation before
yes,
the
sir.
city steps in.
Yes, sir. It would be basically this ordinance points to our normal abatement process, which by law requires that there be a notice given first, you know, that you've got a certain amount of time to correct this violation, or the city will move in and abate it and assess a limit on your property. That's typically 7 to 10 days, you know, time that they have to correct the violation.
Thank you, sir. That answers my question. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. Further question, Ms. Joy, looks like you're unmuted. Do you have a question?
Oh, sorry. Even though they have 7 to 10 days, if they run into an issue, can't find a contractor to trim trees, whatever, they need to communicate with codes. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Very much so. And the codes will work with them in unique circumstances.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Other questions for comments for Mr. O'Neill? Okay, thank you, Steve. We appreciate you being with us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Council, we've got a motion and a second on the floor to make these changes. Is there further discussion? Okay. All those in favor of this, the ordinance to approve this change to Article 36 of our code on first reading, please say aye.
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 Any opposed by the same sign? Okay, motion carries 7-0. All right, Council, our final item tonight is item 8.3. It's on page 402. This is our legislative agenda. So let's, instead of getting a motion to begin discussion on this, since we're going to see an updated document here, Mr. Atkinson, how do you want to handle this? I know you had a chance to email it. Do you want to share that? You want to share your screen? How do you want to go about this?
I think I will try to share the screen, Mayor. I've highlighted those items that have changed as a result of discussion.
Okay, why don't you do that? Council, you all okay with that, with him doing it that way? Okay, let's do that, Mr. Atkinson.
Mr. Yearwood, you're going to have to unlock me so I can share screen.
You should be unlocked. Hang on. Jared, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, it's telling me only host can share.
All right, hang on. Okay, try now.
I got it. Thank you, sir.
Yay, Jared.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, can everybody hear and do you see the document on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so if you would, council, I'm on page 2. This is the first item that we discussed. City will support. Come down to the highlighted text. This is following rules proposed by the Texas Controller of Public Accounts to appropriately distribute online sales tax revenue to point of destination. The additional text now says efforts, so this would be support efforts, to remove minimum sales thresholds through the online marketplaces to establish equity between online and traditional retailers.
Jarrett, let's pause right there for a minute. Ms. Joy, I think that was you were the one that was talked about that. How do you think that sounds to you? Did we lose Ms. Joy? Mark, can you see Mr. Yearwood? Can you see Ms. Joy on the Zoom?
No, sir, I
Looks like
don't.
we lost her.
Okay, Jarrett, why don't you
Hang on, let
continue?
me find her.
Why don't you continue? I'm sure she'll get back in. Let's continue and we'll loop back. Okay.
Okay, so we're at the end now. We're on page 3. This is the end of the support section. Again, we'll talk on the yellow highlighting. Expansion of broadband availability throughout Texas and provision of necessary state and federal funding for such expansion. So this is related to the discussion we had that expansion of the broadband network in the state is a good and great idea. Putting such costs, though, on local government is not. I'll pause, Mayor.
That looks good to me. Why don't you go ahead and catch the last one, and then we'll open it up at that point to comments, and maybe we'll have Ms. Joy back by then.
Okay. So the final, this is an added bullet. We have it in the support section at the moment. So we would support police reform initiatives that are subject to local approval by duly elected governing bodies. And I do think one of the concerns, there are some police reform initiatives that would carry potentially pretty large costs that would be pushed down to your local budget.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm back. I have been tracking some of the bills that have been filed on police reform.
Yes, ma'am.
And they go all over issues, and some of them are very draconian.
Yes, ma'am.
And so that's why I think we need, I mean, we understand that maybe some reform, but every city is different. And in my experience with visiting with cities across the state, is they all have their methods, and a lot of them, it works for them. And I think to come up with one bill that says you got to do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G just doesn't fit. And it's another issue for local control. So I like this wording.
Ms. Joy, did you have a chance to catch the wording on the other two changes?
Yes. And
You're okay with,
they're
okay with
good.
that? You think okay with
Yeah.
that language? Okay,
Yes.
let's I'm going to just go around the horn real quick. Mr. Maskill, you okay?
I'm good.
Ms. Patterson Harris, Mr. Chidas, you guys okay? Got a thumbs
I'm
up?
good.
Good, okay.
I'm good.
Mr. Christian?
The only thing I would say that Jared added support efforts on the previous page. That might be something that you'd want to add to it. It sounded better, I think, support efforts to remove. That's the only thing I'd have.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to read all of those sentences to say the city will support, and then efforts, like, so they're all styled that way. I agree with you, Randy.
Yeah, but what he added is kind of a subdivision of the one just above it.
Right. Well, it could even stand on its own if you chose to do it that way.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
Good.
I just think as you're going down there, just that one word to just add some clarity to it would be
Okay.
my suggestion.
If approved, I think I will move that back over, and it'll
Okay.
be a standalone bullet that matches the remainder.
Okay. Mr. Griffith?
When on the very first change, equity between online and traditional retailers, should that not read brick and mortar or traditional? I don't know.
No. I don't think so. It's not brick and mortar because there are other retailers. I'm not sure what you're trying to say, Jeff. Why brick and mortar?
Because that denotes the difference between online. Traditional could mean you're brick and mortar with online presence.
But if you're
That's all
that,
right. It's just
How
semantics.
about local retailers?
Some of your marketplace sellers may be local.
Yeah.
Yes.
Local could be
Yeah.
all.
Okay.
I don't know.
well, I think the legislation would get at both Mr. Griffith and Ms. Joy's concerns. I think this largely lays out what we will support. And I think the comptroller, based upon a discussion we had with him at lunch a couple of weeks ago, is I think initially he didn't think this was a great idea. And I think he feels like now it may be worth going down this road. So we'll see what they do. Yeah. I know he didn't make the decision, but he's the one that's got to implement it.
Right.
Okay. Other comments on the legislative agenda? Okay. So we've got I'll open the floor for a motion now. I think we've had some discussion on the changes that we suggested during work session. Ms. Joy, can I get a motion from you on this, please?
Move to approve the legislative agenda as presented during the December 1st, 2020 City Council regular meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Massengale. Okay, further discussion on the 2021 legislative agenda. Okay, seeing none. Council, all those in favor of the motion to approve Item 8.3, please say aye.
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 Any opposed by that same sign? Okay, that motion carries 7-0. Ms. Garza, I believe that completes our business. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
Mr. Satterwhite, are you good with everything?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
Thumbs up there. Okay, just a couple of quick reminders, council. We'll meet 2 weeks from today on the 15th. We will have a press conference tomorrow midday, 11:30, as we continue to update the community on our response to COVID-19. And we'll be joined tomorrow by County Judge Curtis Parrish and representatives from UMC and Covenant Health, UMC Health System, Covenant Health System. So just as a teaser for that. Otherwise, if there's no other business for the Lubbock City Council, it's a great day in Lubbock, Texas. It's 5:36 and we're adjourned.